Welcome to In-Silico Trials Real Impact, the In-Silico UK podcast that's revolutionizing the way we think about medical innovation. I'm Professor Alejandro Frangi from the University of Manchester, and I'll be your guide through this fascinating world of In-Silico technologies. In each episode, we'll dive into cutting-edge research and groundbreaking news that are shaping the future of medical product development and regulation. From computational modeling to simulated clinical trials, we are exploring how digital approaches are transforming healthcare, making it safer, more efficient, more equitable, and incredibly precise. So, whether you're a researcher, regulator, a member of the public, or a patient representative, or simply curious about the future of medicine, tune in as we unravel the complex world of in-silico methods and their real-world impact. Get ready to discover how computer-simulated trials are leading to very real breakthroughs in patient care. In-Silico Trials Real Impact, where algorithms and data are saving lives. Let's begin.
Okay, so have you ever imagined, a world where your doctor could treat you based on information from a patient that doesn't actually exist? It's kind of a mind-blowing idea.
Yeah.
We're going to take a deep dive into the world of synthetic data in medicine today.
Right, yeah. Synthetic data is essentially data that's created by artificial intelligence to kind of mirror real patient data, but without any of the privacy concerns.
Gotcha.
So it's a really rapidly growing field with huge potential to change how we approach healthcare.
Yeah, it's definitely a fascinating area. And, the idea of synthetic patients, I have to admit, it's a little bit mind-boggling for me.
Yeah.
But we actually have a really interesting study from The Lancet that shed some light on just how prevalent this technology is becoming.
Yeah, the study found that 20% of general practitioners in the UK are already using AI chatbots in their practice.
Wow.
Which is a pretty surprising statistic.
Yeah, so think about that. Your next doctor's appointment could involve an AI tool that's been trained on this synthetic data.
Exactly, yeah.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know, what's driving this rapid adoption of AI in healthcare?
Sure.
Is it just about efficiency, or are there sort of deeper reasons behind it?
I think it's definitely more than just efficiency. Synthetic data is actually addressing some of the biggest roadblocks we face in medical research.
Okay.
So, for example, if you think about issues surrounding patient privacy,
yeah,
sharing real medical records, even anonymously, can be really ethically and legally complex. But with synthetic data, that's no longer a concern.
So it's like having a digital twin of a patient's data that can be shared and studied without putting anyone's privacy at risk.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
All right.
Are there other advantages besides privacy?
Yeah, absolutely. And another major challenge in medical research is bias.
Okay.
So real-world data sets often reflect existing healthcare inequalities, which can skew the results of a study. But with synthetic data, you can actually control for those biases and create a much more representative data set.
So potentially, we could have new treatments and drugs that are more effective for everyone.
Yeah.
Not just a subset of the population.
That's the hope. Yeah. And here's another crucial advantage.
Okay.
Scale. Sometimes it's just impossible to collect enough real patient data.
Right.
To study certain conditions, especially rare diseases.
Makes sense.
But synthetic data can be generated in large quantities, which opens up research possibilities that simply weren't possible before.
The Lancet article actually highlighted several areas where synthetic data is already making an impact, including cancer, cardiovascular disease, and even the recent COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, they mention how researchers used a synthetic data set from the UK's Clinical Practice Research Data Link to study COVID-19 symptoms and risk factors.
Oh, wow.
So this type of technology could potentially have helped us respond more effectively to the pandemic.
Yeah, imagine if we had access to, massive amounts of synthetic data that accurately mirrored the spread and severity of the virus.
Right.
Could we have potentially accelerated vaccine and treatment development?
Yeah.
Or even predicted outbreaks before they happened?
That's certainly a possibility. And, thinking beyond pandemics, wider use of synthetic data could bring a host of benefits. Imagine faster drug development treatments tailored to your specific needs.
Right.
And maybe even the ability to predict and prevent diseases before you ever show symptoms.
It sounds almost too good to be true, but the article also stressed the need for careful governance when it comes to synthetic data.
Right.
That word always makes me think of bureaucracy and paperwork.
Yeah.
Why is it so important in this context?
Well, governance is crucial because with all these potential benefits come some very real risks.
Okay.
It's like building a powerful new tool. You need the right safety measures and guidelines to ensure it's used responsibly.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but how we manage and control its use in healthcare.
Exactly.
So what are some of the unique challenges we face in governing synthetic data?
One of the biggest challenges is the black box nature of AI.
Right.
We don't always understand exactly how these AI models generate synthetic data,
Right.
which makes it hard to guarantee the data is truly accurate and reliable,
Right.
especially when it comes to making important healthcare decisions.
That uncertainty around the AI process does make you wonder, how can we be sure that synthetic data truly reflects the complexities of human health?
Yeah.
Real patients are unpredictable, their conditions evolve over time,
Right.
and there are countless factors influencing their health. Can we really capture all of that in synthetic data?
That's a key question and one that researchers are working hard to address.
Mm-hmm.
There's ongoing debate about how to best ensure the quality and reliability of synthetic data.
I imagine there are also different perspectives on how we should regulate its use in medicine.
Absolutely. Some experts believe we need a complete overhaul of data regulations to accommodate the unique challenges of synthetic data. Others argue that focusing on specific reporting standards for AI-driven healthcare would be a more practical approach.
So there's no easy answer and a lot of different viewpoints to consider.
Yeah.
It seems like finding the right balance between innovation and regulation will be crucial as we move forward with this technology.
You're absolutely right. And organizations like the International Organization for Standardization are working on developing standards and guidelines for synthetic data, which is a step in the right direction.
So there are active efforts to address these challenges, which is reassuring.
Yeah.
But before we dive into the potential future of synthetic data, I think it's important to step back and reflect on a really fundamental question. If a treatment based on synthetic data actually saved your life, would it matter to you that the data didn't come from a real person?
That's a fascinating question and one that gets to the heart of this whole discussion. We're entering a new era where data, even data that wasn't originally generated by a human being, can have a profound impact on our lives.
Yeah, it really makes you think about, like the evolving relationship between data and technology and our own understanding of what it means to be human.
Exactly. And it's a question that we'll need to keep grappling with as synthetic data becomes more integrated into healthcare.
And this might all seem a bit abstract, but it has like real world implications for all of us. Should we be concerned about synthetic data being used in our own healthcare journeys?
I think it's not about being worried. It's about being informed.
Okay.
Synthetic data is already being used in various ways, from developing new drugs to designing clinical trials. As patients, it's important for us to understand what this means for our own care.
So what steps could we take to stay informed and advocate for ourselves in this, kind of evolving healthcare landscape?
I think don't be afraid to ask questions. If your doctor's using an AI tool, ask about it. How does it work? What data was it trained on? What are the potential benefits and limitations?
Right.
The more we understand these technologies, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the future of healthcare.
That's such an important point.
Yeah.
We need to be active participants in our own healthcare, not passive recipients.
Right.
Speaking of advancements earlier, we touched on the idea of personalized medicine.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on how synthetic data might contribute to that?
Sure. One of the most exciting prospects of synthetic data is the ability to tailor treatments to individual patients.
Okay.
By analyzing vast amounts of synthetic data, AI algorithms can identify patterns and predict how different treatments might work for different people.
So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, we could potentially have treatments designed for our unique genetic makeup, lifestyle, and environmental factors.
Exactly.
That sounds incredibly promising.
It is. It's about shifting from a reactive approach to healthcare, where we wait for symptoms to appear, to a more proactive, preventative approach.
Right.
Imagine identifying potential health risks early on and taking personalized steps to prevent those risks from ever becoming a reality.
That sounds like the ultimate goal, keeping people healthy, rather than just treating them when they're sick. How far away are we from this vision of personalized medicine becoming a reality?
I think it's closer than you might think. We're already seeing the early stages of personalized medicine in areas like cancer treatment, where genetic testing is used to guide treatment decisions. As AI and synthetic data technologies continue to evolve, we can expect to see even more personalized approaches being developed and implemented in the coming years.
This is all incredibly exciting, but it also raises some important questions.
Sure.
For example, What about access to these personalized treatments? Will they be available to everyone, or will they only be accessible to those who can afford them?
That's a crucial question. We need to ensure that the benefits of personalized medicine are equitably distributed. This goes back to the importance of responsible development and governance that we discussed earlier.
Right. It seems like there's this constant balancing act between the incredible potential of these technologies and the need to use them ethically and responsibly. How do we navigate this complex terrain?
It requires ongoing dialogue and collaboration between researchers, policymakers, healthcare providers, and the public.
Speaking of the public, how do you think people generally feel about the use of synthetic data in healthcare? Are there concerns about privacy, trust, or even the idea of machines making decisions about our health?
I think people are generally open to the use of AI in healthcare if it can improve the quality and efficiency of care.
Okay.
However, there are also legitimate concerns about data security and the potential for bias in AI algorithms.
Yeah.
Building public trust is paramount, and that requires transparency, education, and open communication.
We need to have honest conversations about these issues and make sure everyone's voice is heard. It's not just about the technology itself, but the social and ethical implications of how we use it.
That's exactly right. We need to approach this new era of healthcare with a sense of responsibility and a commitment to using these powerful tools for the benefit of all.
You know, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the basics of synthetic data to its potential to reshape the future of medicine. But there's one area we haven't explored yet.
Okay.
The impact of synthetic data on medical research.
Yeah, that's a whole other fascinating dimension to this conversation. Synthetic data has the potential to revolutionize how we conduct medical research, leading to faster discoveries and better treatments.
That's a perfect segue to the final part of our deep dive. After a quick message, we'll be back to delve into how synthetic data is changing the landscape of medical research.
So we look back, before the break, we were talking about how synthetic data has this huge potential to revolutionize medical research.
Yeah.
It's a big claim. So let's break it down. How might that actually work? So traditional medical research often faces, a lot of hurdles. It can be incredibly slow and expensive, and you're always reliant on finding, enough real patients to participate.
Right.
Synthetic data has the potential to address all of these challenges.
So, for someone like me who's not a scientist,
right?
Can you break down how synthetic data could actually speed up the research process?
Sure.
What's the advantage?
Imagine instead of spending, months or even years recruiting patients for a study,
right,
researchers could use AI to generate a synthetic data set that's perfectly tailored to their research question.
Oh, wow.
It's like having a virtual lab where you can create custom data sets on demand.
That sounds super efficient.
Yeah.
But couldn't that lead to researchers cherry picking data to get the results they want?
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
Yep.
And it's why the way that synthetic data is generated and validated is so important.
Yep.
It's not about randomly generating numbers.
Yeah.
The AI is trained on real patient data, learning the complex patterns and relationships.
And then it uses that knowledge to create synthetic data that mimics the properties of the real data.
So there's a lot of rigor involved to ensure that, the synthetic data is actually reliable.
Exactly. And once that synthetic data is generated, it goes through a really rigorous validation process.
Okay.
Researchers use statistical techniques to compare it to the original data, checking for any inconsistencies or biases.
So it's reassuring to know that there are checks and balances in place. Are there any other ways that synthetic data could be a game changer for research?
Definitely think about rare diseases. It's incredibly difficult to find enough patients to conduct traditional clinical trials.
Right.
But with synthetic data, researchers could create these virtual cohorts of patients with rare diseases,
wow,
which opens up possibilities that were never there before.
That's a huge step forward for understanding and treating those conditions. It really highlights how far we've come in such a short time. We're moving from, being limited by real patient data
to having this incredibly powerful tool at our disposal.
It's truly remarkable. And as these technologies continue to evolve and we refine the ethical and regulatory frameworks, synthetic data has the potential to transform the entire landscape of medical research.
It's really exciting to imagine a future where medical research is faster, more efficient, and leads to better health outcomes for everyone.
Yeah, and as with any new technology, staying informed, asking questions, and engaging in thoughtful discussions about the implications is crucial. The future of healthcare is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play.
That's so true. And for our listeners who want to explore this topic further, we've included links to all of the research we discussed in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of synthetic data in medicine. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.